Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we're gonna feed this tree. Right now in Old Stinkola, we're sort of cleaning up the place. We're gonna dig everything minus the magma biome out, and then try to get a total count of all the materials. Specifically, we're looking to see how much total algae we have. We're also going to be able to take all the slime and turn it into algae, but that's sort of a second order effect. The reason why we're trying to figure out how much algae we're going to have is that's going to be able to tell us how long we're going to be able to run Pacu and how many Pacu we're running. In an infinite Pacu situation, you can just have one breeder Pacu and be just fine. But ideally, because we want to feed the tree as much as possible, we'd like to have more than one breeder Pacu. The more breeder Pacus you have, well, the quicker your egg count's going to grow and the quicker you're going to get more fish fillets. And the quicker we can get the fish fillets to the tree, the better. Ironically enough, we're not just dealing with the tree's food supply, we're also dealing with ours. You can see that we have 8.8 tons of sedimentary rock and 9.8 tons of igneous rock now. So we're down to about 20 tons of everything that we actually want to be able to feed these stone hatches. Now we do have Thanos coming back in the spirit of Peace Virgo 14 with a full load of igneous rock. But I'm not trying to play the stress out where we find the food for the stone hatches game. One being the almighty Shovol, but I have plans for the Shovols in the future over at Siltora. I think we're going to run a massive Shovol farm here because, well, it still gets all the regolith it needs. But over on Brino, we don't get any regolith. And the only thing these Shovols eat is regolith, dirt, and iron ore. And here on Brino, we don't really have an infinite supply of that. Well, kinda. We could actually start boiling a bunch of polluted water, turn it into polluted dirt, and then feed that to the Shovols. But that is a horrendous use of polluted water. But what we do have is an enormous amount of carbon dioxide. Right now, every single tile in this power brick has 267 kilos of carbon dioxide. In other words, I think it's time to expand our beautiful slickster ranching. So we're definitely going to get to the business of feeding experiment 52B this episode, but I think we actually have to start with feeding our dupes. Plus, this is going to take them a little while. We're going to make sure this place is spick and span and all cleaned up before we even start to get to work. By the way, the oxygen situation in old Jupiter is working out just fine now. It did take a while for it to catch up, but as you can see, all the Atmosuit docks have a great supply of oxygen, and things are actually looking up. Now, I was a little bummed out about this area here, because I just wanted to put all of our slickster farms right in a row, nice and pretty, right here. But this stupid abyssalite brick that's, 1486 degrees has kind of gotten in the way of that. Now eventually we'll have the item locker 5100 upgraded so we'll be able to handle 1400 degree abyssalite and obsidian, but right now it's not quite to that point. Speaking of which, our petroleum cooler is working like a charm. You can see that our ice brick here is about minus 80. The petroleum's coming in at 72, 78 degrees and is leaving at 19 degrees. Absolutely beautiful. Now the power cost is significant. These thermo aqua tuners are pretty much running flat out. I might relax what we're doing as far as this temperature threshold, but I want to see how long this can go before this ice finally melts. Right now I think we're losing about 2 degrees per cycle. So I guess we'll up it just a little bit. What we're trying to do is find that perfect equilibrium that the thermo aqua tuners can keep this ice block at a steady temperature and our petroleum gets cooled down to a good temperature. But I mean, we're so close. We don't even have to get that much of it. You can see the hot materials are barely sitting in there. I guess we could replace them with some insulated tiles? Yeah, what could go wrong? So because I'm a giant dork and I like to keep all the gravitas buildings in place, we don't want to touch this, so I think our oil collection area will actually be right here. Speaking of which, if we're running 75 slicksters, just an estimate because I know that's what our petroleum supplies could actually feed, that means they'll be consuming 1,500 kilos of carbon dioxide per cycle. And considering that 50% of anything they consume gets turned into crude oil, that means we're going to be getting an extra 750 kilos of oil per cycle. Considering an actual oil well actually produces 2,000 kilos of crude oil per cycle, that's pretty impressive. We may have to actually limit the production of one of these oil wells, because what'll end up happening is we'll have such a huge backlog of crude oil all trying to get into this petroleum boiler, that these pumps will actually end up backing up. And that's not a situation that we want. Of course, who says you can't make 2 petroleum boilers? You know what I'd be willing to bet? Is that I could actually squeeze in another crude oil pipe in here, thread it up just the same way, and because it's not dropping as much crude oil, let's say it's only dropping that extra 750 kilos, so we put a flow control valve on it, and it'll be dropping cold crude oil, but it would be nothing that our geothermal spike couldn't handle. All right, enough of getting sidetracked. Let's actually start the act of building this whole monstrosity. Now, we're going to start with many levels. We know it took 6 ranches of stone hatches to feed our dupes. Of course, we're still getting a little bit of extra, but this is probably being caused by all the shovels, all the bristle blossoms we're still running, and then this supply of slicksters as well. But basically, as a reminder, it takes 2 ranches to feed 5 dupes on max difficulty. So right here, we have enough food for 15 dupes. And it takes about 8 bristle blossoms to feed 1 dupe when it's just bristleberries. But we're doing other things with the bristleberries, such as making gristleberries, which give us 2,000 for every 1,600 calories of bristleberry, and berry sludge, which actually gives us 4,000 when combined with 5 sleet wheat units. So the math is all kind of crazy, but at its simplest form, it takes 6 bristleberries to feed 1 dupe on max difficulty, and we're running 54 bristle blossoms, so that's enough to feed another 9 dupes. So altogether, with just our hatches and our bristle blossoms, we can feed 24 dupes. So at the minimum, we probably want to have at least 6 ranches worth of slicksters. That way we can be comfortable going up to 24, not counting all the extra shovel meat, the sleet wheats, or anything like that. So here we have our 6 levels of ranches and 1 for oil collection. But now let's go through the process of actually making this big enough for a ranch. Remember, you need 96 tiles, and because of the way we're actually going to design these ranches, we actually need 100 tiles, which means we have to dig all the way through here. Well, that's not too shabby, right? Oh yeah, something's definitely getting burnt. We'll make sure that we sweep that up and get it into the item locker as soon as possible, and the item locker can work on it. So I guess we're shaving off about that much. Not too shabby. It's gonna be several chunks of really hot obsidian and abyssalite, but we'll take care of that. The next thing we gotta talk about is our sort of awkward entrances. Well, because we're gonna be packing this place full of carbon dioxide, we don't want carbon dioxide to be spilling out into the rest of our colony, so we need to liquid lock every last ranch. And additionally, because we need it to be its own room, we also need to put a door inside the liquid lock. No big deal. Let me finish the rest of the design and maybe we'll do a nice little montage. Well, here she is in all of her glory. Now, full disclaimer, this is the first time I've tried this design. So chances are I've messed something up and we're going to have to redo it. But for now, I think it's time to kick the montage. Alright, so our beautiful little montage has to come to a close because now I gotta do some emergency maintenance. You may have seen during the montage that we did a quick redesign of the stables, but right now we have more important pressing matters. Some of the stuff that was made out of iron ore is already burning up, and that's because some of these have been exposed for a bit too long. So what we're gonna do is prioritize the construction of these insulated tiles and then prioritize the sweeping of this stuff that is just dumping heat. Watching the dupes do this, it reminds me of a horrible trip to the DMV. I don't know if that analogy makes sense outside of the United States, but here inside the States, DMVs, or the Department of Motor Vehicles, are notorious for having very long lines and everything taking forever. Now, I'm sure it's not the fault of the fine folks at the Department of Motor Vehicles, rather the system that they ended up working in, but I'm sure all of you have similar examples of places that are just like the DMV. Man, did that heat spread quickly or what? You can already see right here the oxygen's around 180, 190 degrees. That's just bad news bears. Even the doors are starting to overheat. While the dupes are fixing all this up, let's go take a look over at Stinkola. All right, not too shabby. We have a lot that's already been dug out. Interestingly enough, this ended up being a tungsten volcano. So already we have 3 tungsten volcanoes on this planetoid. Yeah, this might have been one of the worst ideas I've had in a long time. I thought we can get everything scooped up and insulated before it would matter, but it doesn't look like it. So what we're going to do is do a lovely little trick that I love doing. When everything gets too hot, well, just start throwing down temperature shift plates. The temperature shift plates will absorb a lot of the heat, and then you can just deconstruct the temperature shift plates. Sweep them up, and, well, we'll see how it goes. Unfortunately, there's a lot of temperature spread here, so we definitely need to be building these quicker than how long it's been taking the rest. And for the meantime, so we don't keep wasting materials, we'll just deconstruct all these things that end up overheating. Now, you might be asking yourself, what could we have done different to make sure that didn't happen? Well, like I was saying earlier, if we would have prioritized the building of these insulated tiles, so that way all of this hot abyss light wasn't directly exposed to the environment, that would have definitely helped. But instead, we were busy doing a montage instead of paying attention to the colony. That's my mistake. Or maybe it's yours, Dr. Strange? I also had another idea. We're going to end up pumping all this carbon dioxide into there, so why not do it now? All that carbon dioxide has enough thermal mass, especially considering we have 275 kilos of it per tile. It should get the temperature in here stabilized to around 95 to 100 degrees. Which reminds me, a lot of our iron ore buildings have an overheat temperature of 75. The iron conveyor loaders have an overheat temperature of 125. So iron good, iron ore is not good. So we're going to replace all the iron ore stuff with steel. That also reminds me, we need to get these liquid locks into place before we think about putting all the carbon dioxide in here, or we'll just create a giant mess. So we will make sure we prioritize this, add some liquid vents. Beautiful. Build these liquid locks up, and until we're actually ready, we will cut off the carbon dioxide source. I absolutely love having an infinite supply of petroleum. It just comes in so handy. Now that we got the liquid locks in, we can start our flow of carbon dioxide. Next up is going to be actually loading up the stables with the slicksters. But before we do that, I figured I'd explain to you how this whole thing's going to work. Oh man, I put the automation lines right through the high pressure gas vents. In my defense, with all of these inputs, it's kind of hard to avoid. Instead of moving all the automation wires, we're just going to move all the high pressure gas vents over by one. While they're working on that, I wanted to show you some of the features. We have the critter sensor here. We got to set them up, but basically what's going to happen is we're going to say, hey, if there's below 8 critters in here, we need to send a green signal down to this one incubator. With 6 ranches, we know we're going to be running 48 slicksters. We know that an incubator can produce 5 slicksters in 100 cycles. And 100 cycles is the key time because that's how long a slickster lives. So in other words, we need to replace 45 slicksters every 100 cycles. Well, knowing that one incubator can do 5 slicksters, 9 incubators can do 45 slicksters. Just a few shy of the 48 that we need. So we have one incubator able to be powered. And when you power the incubator, it actually spits out baby critters a lot faster. But a nice feature of the system I have is we don't want, as soon as this critter sensor to turn on, for it to start incubating that critter. We want to make sure it's for real, we actually have a shortage of critters. Because otherwise what happens is one will naturally die off, and there might be critters waiting to go in these incubators. A dupe will come by, grab it, put it in here, and then all of a sudden we have 8 critters. So we don't need the emergency critter sensor automation system to work that way. So what we have is a filter gate. And what we're going to say is, hey, if we've had a green signal for over 200 seconds, then make sure we turn this incubator on because we're going to need new critters. It's not just a deficit from what the incubators are providing. What's great with our critter drop-offs ready, we just so happen to have a huge supply of slicksters ready to go. With our critter drop-offs all set and ready, there's one extra issue we have. Now, we could just start loading up all these incubators and wait the 100 cycles or so to get all of these stables full of slicksters, but quite frankly, we don't have that kind of time. We're down to 0 kilos of sedimentary rock and 0 kilos of igneous rock, which means some of these stone hatches are going to start to starve. But what we can do to make this process a little easier, since you can't just walk up to a slickster and select wrangle, because this is in an open environment, we can actually put a critter drop off here. And once this drop off is here, we can say, hey, auto wrangle any critters over 0. And it should come along and wrangle all of these up and put them into stables. And I've also changed my mind about these gas vents. I just don't think they look good there. Instead, we're going to put them over here. This works much better. And because we want all of these vents to be fed equally, we are definitely not just going to run a ventilation line through them. We're going to sort of do one of these numbers. Now, there are mesh tiles between all of the stables, which means the carbon dioxide would eventually stabilize. But we want to make sure all the critters are being fed the exact same amount. So if we are starting to run low on carbon dioxide, each stable will be able to have a chance independently. And here we go. Right now there's 63 slicksters in this room. We're telling it that there only needs to be 0. Another feature of the slickster stables are the fact that the slicksters themselves will only be in 3 tiles. So anytime a duplicate comes in here, it'll make much quicker for this slickster to be able to get to this grooming station. Now, because of the modifications I made to the stables themselves, you'll notice that they're not actually appearing as stables, and that's because the room size is 98 tiles, where we have a maximum size of 96. This is pretty easy. We're just going to add a couple of tiles right here in the corner. And the reason I decided to make that change is before the slicksters were going to be able to run back and forth in between this area. Well, I ended up bumping this wall out by 1 so that I could put another door and another mesh tile right here, so it forces the slicksters in this area to where they're not actually going to put oil all over our petroleum liquid locks. Wouldn't have been a big deal, but it would have been kind of an eyesore. And here's Shuri wrangling an unwranglable critter. Unfortunately, she has to wait to get the attention of 1 critter out of 60, but the system works a whole lot better than putting down 60 plastic traps. Now, because all of these critters are starting to get hungry, we're going to get rid of all these incubators. There's no reason for us to have them. And there's also no reason for us to waste our time taming hatches. So, unfortunately, it's time for one of those mass cullings. Now, we're not going to actually look at it. We're going to go somewhere else and do some work. And when we come back, we'll just have a bunch of meat. So do you remember that time last episode that I said they have enough berry sludge to last about 50 cycles? Well, unfortunately, it's been 51 cycles. Luckily, dupes do delivery. So we have the dazzling prototype here. We outfitted it with an orbital cargo module stacked full of berry sludge. And wouldn't you know, we can just deploy it to the surface of the planet. And look at this. We now have 800,000 calories of berry sludge. That'll last them another 200 cycles, and we better make sure we're gone off this planetoid in that amount of time. I would love to tell you that I made that delivery just in time, but I guess here's my ugly evidence here. 800 calories of, mush bar. But other than that series of unfortunate events, Stinkola is ready for infinite Pacu. The dupes completely dug out everything. We have our polluted water tank. We're starting to refine all of our slime into algae. We have our water pool just in case the dupes ever run out of berry sludge and we have to make mush bar in a very quick emergency. So yeah, all the essentials. Now during the off time, they're going to spend picking up the planet. And every last bit of debris on this planet is going to go right here. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to finally introduce to you, probably 20 cycles later, the completed infinite Pacu farm and Stinkola slime production to algae system. I don't know. So it's been an entire series. If you're looking for when I last did an infinite Pacu farm, I did another whole episode in Primus episode 17. And this is a very similar system. This tank will have 1 to 2 Pacu in it. We decided on 1 to 2 Pacu because of our supply of algae. We'll get into that in a minute. When Pacu eat from a fish feeder full of algae, they eventually become tame. It's a long process. I want to say it took this little guy probably 10 cycles. Well, I can tell you exactly. He's 11 cycles old. He can't start being tamed until he's not a baby, so it took 6 cycles for him to be tame. But once he's tame, he's going to spit out eggs pretty quickly. You can see their change per cycle is 67%. So more than once every 2 cycles is this fish going to lay an egg. When it lays an egg, this auto sweeper is going to pick it up and file it in one of 2 spots. If it's anything other than a fry egg, it's going to put it into this conveyor loader. If it's a fry egg, it's going to go into this conveyor loader. That's when they're sent up here. All fry eggs are going to go into this area. Well, when they hatch, they'll eventually just bounce into this water pool. Fry eggs will bounce in one of two places. I need to make sure I open this door. If this automation sensor says, hey, we don't have two critters, it's going to keep this bunker door shut, which means the Pacu will flop its way all the way through this door when it finally opens, and then into this pool. You can see that we have a pneumatic door here. We can open this one too, but it's not a big deal either way. And that'll continue to happen until there's at least two Pacu in this tank. When there's two Pacu in this tank, the critter sensor says, nope, that's too many, which then sends a green signal, which then opens this door. Once the door is open, the fry eggs that are hatching will just fall into the infinite pool. Now, why is this an infinite pool? Well, it has to do with how big the space is. You'll notice there's 9 tiles in this room. I believe the magic number is 8. As long as it's at least 8 tiles and no eggs, this pool of fish will continue to lay their own eggs. That's where we have another auto sweeper. Now, this auto sweeper's job is only going to be to get eggs out of this pool. Because remember, it'll only be an infinite Pacu farm if eggs don't live in here. Eggs have to go into 1 to 2 places. This spot here, or this spot here. Once they hatch, then they're free to come down here as Pacu. It is important when you're designing your infinite Pacu farm that you make sure these eggs are separated from the main pool. For the regular fry eggs, you can see there's a door here and a bunker here, which means this is its own room. The same goes for this one little 1-tile room here. It's separated by this door here. The door is open in this case because Pacu need to be able to flop through it. And now that this auto sweeper is complete and these 2 conveyor loaders, you can see that the auto sweeper can reach into this pool and then deliver the eggs where they need to go. Once again, all regular fry eggs go in here and all the other eggs go in here. Why, you may ask? Well, we don't want to mess up our system by introducing any tropical fries or gulp fries or anything else. We just want standard Pacu. So all the regular Pacu go up here, they hatch, they fall down, and thus continue the circle of life. Now the question is, for how long in our example? Well, right now we have 22.5 tons of algae and 20 tons of slime. Because we are populating with 2 Pacu, we could say as long as it's above 0 and flip this around, but 2 Pacu will really help us get the whole system started. Regardless if you run out of algae, once the whole system is started, you'll have infinite Pacu. But for our case, we want these 2 guys to breed for as long as they can. Now eventually, this algae distiller is going to turn all of that slime into algae at a rate of 1 to 3. The algae distiller takes 600 grams of slime and turns it into 200 grams of algae. Now remember, we've also trapped a bunch of puffs in here, and the puffs are breathing all the polluted oxygen and spitting out more slime. They'll do that forever as well. Now unfortunately, there's not enough puffs in here to really make a difference, and we're not going to leave anybody on this planet, so this is the amount that we'll have. But whenever they spit out more slime, this auto sweeper will also spit into this algae distiller. So let's say all said and done, we have 40 tons of algae. Well, when we come over here and we're feeding 2 Pacu 140 kilos of algae per cycle, it comes out to be about 140 to 150 cycles. That means for 150 cycles, this Pacu is going to start breeding and lay a ton of eggs. On top of that, all of the Pacu in here will lay 1 egg before they die. So that means if we end up with 200 Pacu in this tank, even when we run out of algae and we're no longer able to produce breeders, we'll still keep 200 Pacu in this tank because there's always going to be 200 Pacu, each laying an egg before they die. That'll be our permanent number. So what happens when they die? Well, in the main tank, this auto sweeper will pick up the fish fillet and put it in this conveyor loader. You can see we have another conveyor loader here for this auto sweeper, and it'll pick up all the fish fillet and put it into this conveyor loader. And both of those conveyor loaders will send it across this shipping line and drop it off into this conveyor chute. Now when the fish fillet hits this tile right here, Experiment 52B gobbles it up. Once it does that, it spits out resin. Now hold on with me, we're almost there. Once the resin is spit out, it falls to these mesh tiles, and this liquid pump grabs up whatever resin is in range. That resin is then transported up here to a beautiful interplanetary launcher. Now, the interplanetary launcher right now, for instance, has 9 kilos of resin. When it has 50 rad bolts and 50 kilos, we have it set to launch to Brino. You can see here we have a rad bolt generator that is slowly collecting rad bolts. And when it has 51, it's going to spit them out over to this interplanetary launcher. And the interplanetary launcher will have enough fuel to launch whatever resin's in there. In fact, we'll probably drop this down to 2 kilos because I'm not sure we're going to have the 50 kilos by the time this is ready. Now, you might notice the water here. Why the water? Well, rad bolt generators generate heat. So do interplanetary launchers. So we actually have the resin passing by the water in 2 different areas to make sure that this water stays cool. The resin comes out at 35.9 degrees. So when we start getting good resin production, it'll transfer that cooling over to this water, and it'll keep this rad bolt generator and the interplanetary launcher cool enough. And what about power? Well, we have that taken care of too. We've done a modification on our solar panel plant, and you can see that we have 5 solar panels. Those 5 solar panels feed this battery bank. We have 9 jumbo batteries here, and it's plenty of batteries to be able to hold enough charge to last through the night. By the time the day cycle kicks, we still have juice in these batteries, which means this rad bolt generator is not going to run out of power, because if it did, it would lose its rad bolts and we'd never be able to load up the interplanetary launcher. Additionally, this whole system requires power, along with our algae distiller. And there you have it. As soon as the duplicants finish this fish fillet conveyor loader, this system will be 100% automated, and cross your fingers, never need dupe intervention again. Now, the dupes are going to stay on the planetoid for a little while. They're going to sweep every last item and drop it off at this automatic dispenser, just to make things easier. And what we're probably going to do is we're going to put another conveyor loader here and hook it up with the interplanetary launcher. So anytime that we need some more material from this planet, well, we can just launch it back home. The last little bit I wanted to show you was the small conveyor system that keeps the algae system full. This auto sweeper has access to this algae drop off here. So whenever this fish feeder needs a little bit more algae, it grabs it from this pile. And this conveyor loader is also connected to this conveyor chute. So whenever this algae distiller finishes with some algae, this auto sweeper picks it up, throws it in this conveyor loader, and then drops it off where it'll eventually be fed to the fish. And we'll revisit Stinkola in an episode or 2 so you can see the update and see how everything's working. Over on Brino, our slickster stables are doing pretty good. Our carbon dioxide is all the way up to this level, and we're using it to actually push all this oxygen out of here. You'll see we have a couple airflow tiles, and since carbon dioxide always falls below oxygen, it'll eventually push all of this oxygen out of here. And you can see here our eggs of almost 100% switched over to larva eggs. So all of the larva eggs, molten larva eggs, and long-hair slickster eggs will all come here to eventually be transformed into meat, where Clark Kent will faithfully turn it over into barbecue. I also realized these puffs are eventually going to die too, and when they do, they're going to spit out meat. Might as well feed that meat to the tree as well. So the conveyor loader will come drop it off over here. This auto sweeper knows what to do with it, sends it right in here, where it'll grab all the meat and Pacu fillets and send them over to the tree. Well, now all that's left to do is wait 50 to 100 cycles and get this Pacu farm spinning up, feeding the tree, getting the resin, and starting to make some insulation. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed learning about the system, the infinite Pacu, and seeing how you can have a colony survive on its own. I know I had fun in this episode. I hope you did too, and I'll talk to you soon.